and it contains some of the laws of Yom Kippur. So they say, the Super Bowl or the World Series have rules. For example, all championship games play a full 7-inning game. There's no time limit. 10 runs after 3 innings, 8 runs after 4 innings, and 6 runs after 5 innings. Tied games in bracket, and ITB will put a runner on a second. The rules govern the players in the game from beginning to end, and every game and its unique rules which give it its structure and flavor. But I never saw included in the rules what happens after the game is over and the player's on his own. No rule will specify, for example, that following the end of the game, each team player must return to his own home. It's no one's business. The game's over. He can do what he wants. As long as he's a law-abiding citizen, is not going to violate the law. Which is why, Lahavdil, Bein Areich, it's surprising to read in the Code of Jewish Law recorded by Maimonides concerning the laws of Yom Kippur, which are recorded in this week's weekly Torah portion. And after a loaded night and day of Yom Kippur, in which the high priest performed the intricate, unique service of the holiest day of the year in the Beit HaMikdash in the Holy Temple, Maimonides concludes the schedule of the day. It says, Va'achakach mikadesh yodo v'raglov ufeshed bigdei, and I'll translate. He says, upon concluding the Yom Kippur service, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he would wash his hands and feet. He removed the golden vestments, and he dressed himself in his own clothes, and he set off for his home. And the entire people would accompany him to his home, and he would celebrate a festival over the fact that he had emerged in peace from the holy. Now, Maimonides makes it a point to specify in his code of law that at the conclusion of Yom Kippur, the high priest would don on his personal clothes and would go home. But it's a strange addition. It's not like the Torah gives a commandment that he should go home. So what's the point of writing this? And obviously, at the end of the day, he would go home. Where should the high priest go after Yom Kippur? Bowling, to the pizza shop, to work out in the gym. And if he needed, he had some other options. Perhaps he wanted to go to shul, or maybe to visit his mother. Why does the law state that he must go home? The day and the service are over. Can't he go where he'd like to go? And what if he wants to go to study some Torah before he went home? What if he wants to hang around in the Holy Temple for an hour or two? What if he wants to just relax in the chamber of the high priest, which is known as the Lishkas Kohen Gadol? Why send him home? And why does the law even have to discuss where he went after Yom Kippur was over? It's no one's business. Who cares where he goes at night? The day is over, the work is over, and he's on his own. If Maimonides is just telling us the fact that the way what usually used to happen, that the high priest would usually go home, why is this included in the code of Jewish law as a part of the laws of Yom Kippur? When it's not the law, it's just the way things usually happen. In fact, the source of Maimonides is in the Mishnah. There, it does not state it as a law that the high priest went home. It just mentions that the people would escort him to his home. And this is what the Mishnah says in the Tractate Yuma. It says that they would go ahead and bring him his clothes, he would get dressed, and they would escort him home. Now, Maimonides makes a point to state that he went home. And there's another interesting question. The Torah states that the high priest who performed the Yom Kippur service had to be a married man. And again, in the words of Maimonides, that he would go ahead and do the service, but he had to be a married fellow. Why? Why did the Torah demand that the high priest should be a married fellow? So the Rebbe once offered a marvelous explanation to all this. It was August 30th, 1986. It was Shabbos. The Torah portion that week was the portion of Rabbi. It was after Tisha B'Av, was the 25th of Av, and the Rebbe instituted that we study Maimonides every single day. Every Chabad rabbi, every Chabad individual, many non-Chabad, they follow the Rebbe's custom, which is to study 3 chapters or 1 chapter or just a mitzvah every day of Maimonides. So that particular day was the daily study part, was covering the views of the laws of Yom Kippur. And during the Farbrengen, the Rebbe shared a profound and relevant insight. He says, indeed, the Maimonides is teaching us that this is indeed the law, and may be the most important law in all the laws of Yom Kippur. Perhaps the most critical part of the laws of Yom Kippur is what happens after Yom Kippur. You see, Yom Kippur is the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. On the holiest day of the year, the holiest human being entered the holiest place on earth. And this was a convergence of holiness of every level of reality: time, space, and soul. The holiest person standing in the holiest place during the holiest time to prepare for this, confluence of the most sacred points of time, space, and spirit. So the high priest underwent a process of sanctification. He withdrew from his home, from his marriage, and from his family life, from his everyday self. And for 7 days, he secluded himself in the holy temple, divorced from the cares and wants of physical life. And this is what Maimonides says on the laws of Yom Kippur. He says 7 days before Yom Kippur, the holy priest, the high priest, is removed from his home to his chamber in the holy temple. Now, this is a law passed down from Moses, and he's separated from his wife during these 7 days. So holiness is transcendence. Holiness is disengagement from the physical, disavowal of the mundane, departure from the familiar and everyday. So only after the high priest separated could he enter the innermost and most sacred chamber in the Beit HaMikdash, in the holy temple, which was the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. And he drawed forth the spiritual essence of life for the year, for the world, for humanity. And that is why all of us in Kippur, we don't eat or drink. We pray much of the day. We disengage from our material pursuits. And Yom Kippur, the sages say, every one of us is like an angel. We dress in white. We spend 24 hours in heavenly oases of spirituality, introspection, and intimacy with the divine. But here's the catch. Holiness is not an end in itself. According to the Torah, holiness has an aim: to return to the very arena it has escaped and remake it in its image, to sanctify the material, to elevate the mundane, to sublimate the everyday. You see, had holiness been the ultimate goal, the soul could remain in heaven, where it lived in eternal holiness. So the soul descended in this world in order to transform the unholy into holy. So the high priest concluded the Yom Kippur service. He went home. And this is not just a fact, but halacha, a law, an integral part of the observance of Yom Kippur, maybe its most integral part. So for the high priest, return to home life was the ultimate test and validation of the sacredness of the day. It emphasized the fact that not only had he entered the holy, but he also had the ability to bring the entire experience back home. He had succeeded in making his post-Yom Kippur life a tranquil continuum of the day's holiness. The Talmud tells us that 4 people entered the spiritual orchard. 1 died, 1 lost his mind, 1 became a heretic, and only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and emerged in peace. So that's the key. What happens in the orchard is important. But far more important is what happens when you emerge from the orchard. Do you know how to come home? Now, it's always easy to go home. Many a celebrity or spiritual guru lose their marriages because they don't know how to go home. They don't know how to integrate their genius, their art, their ecstasy into their daily routine and schedule. So the musical artist finishes a concert where he was worshipped by 50,000 plus fans and he felt superhuman. Now he comes home and his wife says, please take out the garbage and don't forget to clean up after yourself. In our generation, our times, it's, you know, sadly, at times a challenge to comprehend something like that. But this is the core of Judaism. Yom Kippur is worthless if you don't know how to go home. If it does not translate in how you live with people in a simple and mundane day. This is the most important law of the holiest day on the Jewish calendar of Yom Kippur. After all the spiritual elevation, you need to go home. You need to know how to be a normal human being, a husband, a father, a wife, a mother, and a member of society. Not to please others and fit into other people's boxes, but in order to bring the high level energy into your own box, into your own mind, into your own heart, into your own body, in order to heal the world where God sent your soul to help repair it. And it is why the high priest Yom Kippur needed to be married and have a home. For marriage really requires from a person not to live in isolation. And even it's in the most spiritual elevation, but to be part of a unit, to be part of someone else's life. So marriages demands us to be attentive, focus, tuned into another person, and it demands of me not to run away to the skies or to my comfort zones, but to engage fully with another person and with my environment. Now, it's hard for many people. Isolation is sometimes far easier, at least short term, but it's in relationships where we become the people we're supposed to become. I know people who are very holy in the shul. They close their eyes and they connect to God. But when they come home or go to the office, they become different people. They do not know how to translate it into their relationships, into the real world, because their spirituality was an escape from themselves, not an elevation of the self. You see, Judaism teaches otherwise. You need to work through your issues, your triggers, your wounds, your traumas. Divine awareness needs to help me process my emotions and face my demons with compassion and conviction. And that makes all the difference. So some people are very successful outside of the home. In the home, it's a disaster. But we need to work on this because home is the epicenter. Home is where life really happens. Or in the words of that lovely song, mid pleasures and palaces, though we may roam, but it's ever so humble, there's no place like home. A charm from the skies seems to hollow us there, which seek through the world is ne'er met with elsewhere. Home, home, sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And this is true in so many areas of life. We're getting ready to commemorate the Yom HaShoah, which is the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I was honored to be having lunch with a woman who, on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, she went with her husband of blessed memory, and she just joined us over Passover. What a heart-wrenching tale. But she went to Auschwitz with her husband. And, there was the March of Living, and there's many powerful events that take place, reminding ourselves that our people have endured so much. We remember the 6 million that passed, and we commit ourselves to the sacred memory and fight for Jewish pride, dignity, safety, and security, now more than ever after October 7th. And it's all so moving important, but we sometimes fail to mention a most important ingredient in all of this. What are we taking home with us? You know, thousands of teens march in Auschwitz stating, never again. Their hearts swell with sadness and pride. It's incredibly powerful. It's a Yom Kippur of sorts. But Judaism says, now do not forget to bring it all home. You know, we built incredible museums, monuments, memorials. Our group just returned from Israel visiting Yad Vashem. And it's heartbreaking when you go through there. But on the other hand, it's heartwarming and it's so vital and important. But now we must ask ourselves, how do I take it home? What does this mean during the 364 days of the year when I'm not in the March of Living, when I'm not at a Holocaust museum, when I'm not at a memorial, or it's not Holocaust Remembrance Day? So if you were to ask the 6 million monuments, the monuments that are out there to memorialize the 6 million that passed, and if you would ask a moment those 6 million holiest souls, brothers and sisters, who are murdered for one reason, because they were Jewish, and moments before their death, you would ask, what is your final wish? What do you think they would answer? What is that those 6 million holy brothers and sisters, mothers and children, husbands and Zadis and Bubis, what do you think they would want most? Do you think their only message would be, build me a stone in Washington, Berlin, Paris, Moscow? Will this be all? I think they would say, go and rebuild our people. Make them stronger than ever. Build powerful Jewish families and communities. Make sure that Yiddishkeit lives and prospers in the most incredible ways. Don't turn us into stones. Turn us into a living presence in your lives. Fill your homes with Yiddishkeit, with Torah and mitzvahs. Let our souls and values infuse your lives 365 days a year. You see, when I wrap tefillin in the morning and I pray, when I study Torah each day, when I give tzedakah, charity daily, when I celebrate the Shabbos, or I light Shabbos candles, or when I put a mezuzah on my door, or when I have a choice and I eat kosher in my home, when I give children and my grandchildren a Jewish Torah education, I'm not just remembering the 6 million. I'm continuing their lives. I am bringing the sacred memory into my home, my family, my relationships, my daily life. You know, a few years ago, the president of Israel, who was actually a grandchild of the first chief rabbi of Israel, his name is Herzog, and he paid a visit to a very renowned rabbi, historian, author, and educator. The guy's name was Rabbi Beryl Wine. He was a Chicago native. He was living in Jerusalem at the time. And during the visit, Rabbi Wine shared with the president a personal memory of 1946. He was 10 years old at the time. And the grandfather, Israeli president, who this president's named after, who was the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Herzog, he came to visit Chicago. And Rabbi Wine says, I was 10 at the time. And my father woke me up early morning and said, we're going to the airport. Rabbi Herzog is arriving to Chicago. And all the rabbis in Chicago were there. He says, I recall his appearance as he exited the airplane. He was a commanding figure with a silver-handled rabbinic cane in one hand and a Pentateuch in the other. And he traveled to the rabbinical school and gave a lecture. There were about 200 people there from all over the Midwest. And then he spoke about what brought him to Chicago. He says, I've just come from meeting the Pope of Rome. I presented him with the names of 10 2,000 Jewish children who had been hidden in the monasteries and other church institutions by their desperate parents. And I asked the Pope to return these children to the Jewish people. None of the parents are alive. They belong to the Jewish people. But he refused. He told me that once they entered a Catholic institution, they have been baptized immediately and now were Catholics, and they needed to remain Christian forever. So Rabbi Wein continued sharing his memory of the Israeli president. He says, then Rabbi Herzog put down his head and he started to sob. He started to cry. Rabbi Wein said, I never heard an adult sob. Not before and not since. And he put his head down on the podium and he just wept. He says, I've never before seen a grown man crying like that. 2,000 years of our bitter exile came pouring out in an overwhelming display of emotion and tears. And we were all stunned. And after several minutes, Rabbi Herzog finally looked up and thundered to the crowd, I cannot save those thousands of Jewish children. I did whatever I can to do. But I ask of you, how are you going to help rebuild the Jewish people? He says, after that speech, we went in line to shake his hand, and he repeated the message to each child directly. It was my turn. He looked at me, a 10-year-old child, and he said, did you hear what I said? Remember what I said. Do not forget. Rabbi Wein looked at the Israeli president. He says, it's more than 70 years later. He still hears the echoes of Rabbi Herzog's question. A constant mandate and charge. How are you helping rebuild the Jewish people? And I still hear those words ringing in my ear. It changed my life and the lives of many who were present. From our group, a large amount of students went on to build beautiful families and creating amazing institutions. The young American audience and that got involved in Jewish educational and outreach, educating tens of thousands to be part of Jewish people. Many of them I'm still connected to this very day. And it all began with that one saturated speech that was filled with tears of a man who cared. So this is what this week's parsha teaches us, that it's so important what the Kohen does after his service in Yom Kippur. It's so important what we do after shul, what we do after we study Torah. How are we bringing our Yiddishkeit home? It's our calling today, and even stronger, as so many of the survivors sadly have left us. And heartwarming speeches and sermons and memorials, they're all good, but they won't cut it. This week's parsha teaches us we need to bring it home. So in the merit of us taking our precious time to study Torah, let's hope that God will do his mitzvah and very soon send us the ultimate time, which will be the coming of Mashiach now, and the merit of all our collective good deeds around the world. Let's hope that God will do the greatest miracle, releasing the hostages and bringing Mashiach now. Any questions? Beautiful. All the best. Sei gesund, and we look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. right here.